I want to tell you about a number that never showed up in Cristiano Ronaldo's bank account. £450,000. That's what Real Madrid owed him after the 2014 Champions League final. And here's the part that took years to actually surface. He never touched it, not a cent. Most people saw the trophy, the tears, the shirtless celebration in the Lisbon rain. Nobody was asking where the bonus check went. I was. Let me paint the picture for you. May 24, 2014, Estádio da Luz, Lisbon, Portugal. Ronaldo's home country. Real Madrid against Atletico Madrid, the club's 10th European Cup, the one they'd been chasing for 12 years. La Décima. Atletico actually led for most of the match before Sergio Ramos's stoppage-time header dragged it into extra time, where Real Madrid pulled away and won 4-1, with Ronaldo himself scoring the final penalty in the closing minutes. Under the terms of the club's bonus structure for that season, Ronaldo was due a Champions League winner's payment widely reported at around £450,000. That's not pocket change. That's a life-changing sum for almost anyone reading this. For a footballer at that level, it's still real money sitting on the table. Here's where it gets interesting. He didn't deposit it. He didn't spend it on another car, another watch, another wing of his own house. He split it 3 ways, between UNICEF, World Vision, and Save the Children, the 3 charities he had been serving as an ambassador for since 2012. 3 different organizations, 3 different missions, 1 single transfer of funds that quietly closed the loop on a season that had already made him a legend in Madrid. Now you might be wondering, why does this matter more than just being a nice gesture? Let me break down exactly why this single decision tells you more about him than the trophy does. Component 1. Timing. This wasn't a random Tuesday donation announced with a press conference and a photographer. This came directly off the back of the biggest victory of his career to that point. Anyone who's worked inside a football club knows that the days after a trophy like that are consumed by celebration, by media demands, by personal afterglow. The bonus payment is supposed to be the reward for all of it. Choosing that exact moment to redirect the money is a statement about priorities, not a PR stunt squeezed in during a quiet news week. Component 2. Pattern. This is where it gets deeply personal, because the Champions League bonus wasn't an isolated act. The year before, in 2013, he'd been named to UEFA's Team of the Year, which came with a prize of around €100,000. He gave that to the Red Cross. A year before that, in 2012, he personally covered the cost of cancer treatment for a 9-year-old Real Madrid fan, paying for expensive medication and helping the family with arrangements most clubs never get involved in at all. Go back further, to 2009, and you find him donating roughly €114,000 to build a cancer support center at the hospital in Madeira that had treated his mother, Dolores, after her breast cancer diagnosis. The center's director at the time, Isabel Aguiar, said something that really stuck with me. She said she believed he made the gift specifically because of his mother. Think about what that means. This wasn't a man discovering charity because his agent told him it was good for his image. This was a pattern stretching back years, tied to something that actually happened inside his own family, with at least 3 separate, fully unrelated medical cases threaded through it before the 2014 final ever happened. Component 3. The ambassador roles weren't decorative. Being attached to UNICEF, World Vision, and Save the Children meant his name was already on letterhead, already on campaign material, already vouching for these organizations publicly years before that final in Lisbon. Sending the Champions League money to those same 3 charities wasn't him discovering a cause in a moment of euphoria. It was him following through on a commitment he'd already made years earlier and rarely talked about. That same year carried a 4th example. Most people never connect to any of this. Months before the final, the family of a 10-month-old boy named Eric Ortiz Cruz, who suffered from a rare brain condition called cortical dysplasia, had only asked Ronaldo for a signed shirt or a pair of boots to auction off toward his surgery costs. He donated the items for their auction and went further, pledging to help cover the surgery itself, estimated at around €60,000. 2 unrelated children. 2 completely unrelated medical conditions inside the same calendar year as the bonus decision, and neither one ever got mentioned in the same sentence as the trophy he was lifting that May. But that's not all. Here's the kicker that most retrospectives leave out entirely. Not everything attributed to Ronaldo's generosity over those years was actually true. In 2015, after the Nepal earthquake, a French football magazine reported that he had donated nearly $8 million to Save the Children's relief effort. It spread everywhere. Save the Children itself had to step in and publicly state that the report was false. He hadn't made that donation. That correction barely traveled a fraction as far as the original false claim did. Think about what that contrast tells you. The donations that were real, the Champions League bonus, the Red Cross prize money, the Cancer Center, those moved through official channels, got confirmed by club statements and verified reporting, and still ended up as footnotes. The one donation that was fabricated went viral instantly because it was bigger, cleaner, and more dramatic than the truth. That's not a flaw in Ronaldo's story, that's a flaw in how these stories get told. The real generosity was quieter and harder to verify than the myth. And the myth traveled faster because nobody had to check it. Here's something most casual observers miss entirely. The Save the Children relationship didn't end the day he became an ambassador in 2012. In 2016, he made an actual confirmed donation to that same organization, specifically earmarked for food, clothing, and medical care for children affected by the conflict in Syria. That's the same charity whose name got falsely attached to an $8 million figure in the Nepal story a year earlier. Think about the irony sitting inside that timeline. The organization that had to publicly deny a fabricated number in 2015 quietly received a real one from him in 2016, and almost nobody connected the two events because the fake story had already done its damage and moved on by the time the real one happened. There's one more detail that belongs in this pattern, and it has nothing to do with money at all. Ronaldo has spent years fronting blood donation campaigns, and he's been open about a specific reason he avoids tattoos, since freshly tattooed skin isn't immediately eligible for donation. In 2015, he put it simply. He said we can all make a difference by donating blood. Think about what that means coming from a man who can buy almost anything he wants. He chose to keep something as ordinary as his own skin tied to a cause that costs him no money at all, just a personal restriction most players his level never think twice about. The same pattern shows up again just months after that Lisbon final. When he was named winner of that year's Ballon d'Or, he didn't just pose with the trophy and move on. Earlier that year, on Spanish radio, he had promised that if he won it, he'd celebrate part of it with a group of children being treated for leukemia. When the award actually arrived, he followed through and spent time with those kids exactly as he'd said he would, months before anyone was watching to check. A promise made live on the radio isn't something you can quietly walk back once the cameras eventually show up. Either you follow through or the whole thing falls apart in public. He followed through. Let me break down what a simple jersey auction or a one-off photo opportunity, the kind of gesture most players make once or twice a season, could never bring to this story. It could never explain why the same three organizations kept receiving funds across multiple years. A one-time gesture doesn't build a pattern. It could never connect back to a real family event, the way the Madeira Cancer Center connects directly to his mother's diagnosis and recovery. It could never survive a fact check the way the Nepal story failed to. Real commitments leave a paper trail through the actual charities involved. Invented ones usually don't. It could never explain why he gave away prize money tied to individual recognition, the UEFA Team of the Year honor, rather than just the team bonus that's easier to write off as a club-mandated gesture. It could never account for the timing right after the biggest win of a career, when keeping the money would have raised zero questions from anyone. And it could never explain why, a year before that Champions League final, he'd already auctioned off his actual 2013 Ballon d'Or replica trophy, the physical object itself, for around €600,000, with every cent going to the Make-A-Wish Foundation. A jersey costs nothing to replace. A trophy like that doesn't get a second copy. Here's exactly how to think about it. A donation made for the cameras ends when the cameras leave. A donation made because of a pattern, a mother's illness, an ambassador role taken seriously, keeps showing up years later in stories nobody assigned anyone to write. There's a fundamental difference between generosity as image management and generosity as a habit that happens to occasionally become visible. Now here's where it gets even better, because this is where the official record actually backs up everything I just laid out. Real Madrid's bonus structures from that era are well documented in financial reporting on the club. The Red Cross donation from the UEFA prize money is confirmed in club and federation statements from 2013. The Madeira Cancer Center donation has a name, a date, and a quote attached to it from the person who ran the facility. Outlets like ESPN and Goal.com later cross-referenced these same donations against club statements and contemporary coverage from that period, which is exactly why the real ones held up under scrutiny, while the Nepal figure didn't survive a single phone call to the charity involved. None of this required speculation. It required someone actually going back and checking which stories held up and which one, the most dramatic one, didn't. So remember that number I mentioned at the start. £450,000 sitting there after the biggest game of his career, completely untouched by the man who earned it. That wasn't generosity performed once for a headline. It was generosity that had already been operating quietly for years before that final whistle in Lisbon, and kept operating long after the story stopped being news. He wasn't just giving money away that night. He was closing a loop that started with his mother's hospital bed in Madeira, ran through a Red Cross donation nobody noticed a year earlier, and ended up funding 3 organizations that were never going to put his face on a billboard for it. Nobody else's bonus check from that final tells a story like that, because nobody else's history lined up the same way. And this didn't stop being true once the headlines moved on. 6 years later, in 2020, with stadiums empty and Europe locked down by a pandemic, Ronaldo and his longtime agent Jorge Mendes jointly donated around €1 million to fund intensive care units at 2 hospitals back in Portugal, Santa Maria in Lisbon, and Santo Antonio in Porto. The money went toward ventilators, ICU beds, and protective equipment, arranged personally through Mendes, rather than through any club or federation channel. There was no trophy that year, no final to celebrate, no bonus check sitting on a table waiting to be redirected. Just the same instinct showing up again long after the story this video is actually about had already happened. So there you have it. The real reason that bonus never showed up in his account had nothing to do with the trophy and everything to do with everything that came before it. Every highlight package from that night shows the same 40 seconds on loop, the sprint, the shirt, the roar. None of them show the wire transfer that happened days later, because a wire transfer doesn't make for good television. But it's the part of that night that actually tells you who he was before anyone was filming. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.